I don't know whether it's going to become the next Google or not, but for sure we're serving communities and we're serving families, and I think we're gonna see our kids change the world.
Tanner, that's quotable. That's totally quotable. Neću ništa pričam zato što hoću da sačuvam za... Welcome to another episode of the Dope Designer Club. Today, my guest is Milu Nikolic, or Milu, as we like to call him. He's a very dear friend. We're basically like family. And I'm so happy he's here. He's on vacation, and he has graciously agreed to be my victim today for this interview. So welcome, Milu.
Thank you, Branka. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thanks for being here.
Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah. So we have kids that are about the same age. You guys lived here in LA for a while they were little. Now you live in Serbia. I always felt like that our friendship was like very easygoing. I always loved our conversations, and I always felt like I learned something from you every time we spoke. Milu, I gotta tell you, like when I was telling Tanner like who our next guest is, I said like he's a finance guy. I'm not really sure what he does, but he's one of the smartest people I know. And so I just loved, being your friend for all these years and knowing your family. And we used to vacation together. And I feel like we're reunited again here in LA. And your boys are big now, just like my daughter. And like time flies. And, we still have this friendship. So thank you so much for being my friend for so long.
Thank you for being my friend.
Thank you for being. But I wanted to start the interview. I listened to another interview of yours recently where you talked a little bit about your youth. And you lived in many different countries growing up. And I was recently in Switzerland, and you spent a lot of time in Switzerland. So tell me about that experience.
Yes, I have. I was sent to boarding school, to high school in Switzerland when I was 13 years old, and stay in Switzerland until age of 24 when I left for my business school in the States.
Got it.
So 11 years overall, during which I've graduated high school and undergrad.
So you
and worked a couple of years.
So you spent like kind of like your formative years there, actually.
Indeed, I have between Switzerland and then Yugoslavia, today Serbia.
Got it. So what was this like for you? Like what did you like it there?
Yeah.
Like
I like Switzerland a lot. It's a really great model, if you want, great cultural model, because it's a country with the least natural resources. And traditionally in Middle Ages, they were starving. It's a mountainous country, so land is not productive. You cannot grow crops or fruit or vegetable. And traditionally, because it was such a poor country, the younger sons, so the eldest son would inherit the farm, and the youngest sons would be mercenaries. That's why Swiss are the most famous mercenaries in the Middle Ages. It stays, the remnant of this is the Pope's Swiss Guard. So Pope today has a guard which is comprised of several hundred, I don't know the exact number, but several hundred of Swiss soldiers. So they were the mercenaries, and the reason why they were the mercenaries is because the land couldn't feed them. They had to go away and find something to do to feed themselves and their families. So it's a very poor country from the resources. And then in the last couple of 100 years, especially the last 100 years, it grew to become the wealthiest country in the world on a GDP per capita basis. Much wealthier than some of the, oil-rich and population small countries in the Middle East. And this is based on something the Swiss invented. And what they invented is honesty in business.
Mm.
They were actually the first to understand that the most profitable business is the business which is done honestly. And hence, you have all an area of industry which they championed, developed, often introduced. That include, of course, banking, which by definition has to be based on honesty. Otherwise, if you put the money in a bank and the
It might
banker
run away.
runs away with your money, it's you're not going to bank a long time with that bank.
Right.
So banking, of course, is the most famous, but also precise mechanics, watchmaking, which is also based, when you do the small things, the small mechanical parts, when you put them together, if you do it honestly, it's really high quality. So you have watch factories on this side of the border prospering, on the Swiss side, and for example, on the French side going bankrupt. Also, travel and lodging, tourism industry was developed by Switzerland. Ritz, the founder of the eponymous chain of super luxury hotels, the Ritz hotels, was a Swiss guy who actually developed luxury hotels. That is also based on honesty because, of course, if somebody comes to your property and spends the night there, well, if he survives the night, it's probably a good, you
It's a good
probably
sign.
get a Yelp recommendation. You have a Google 5 stars. So I like Switzerland. It's based on honesty. It's very hardworking people, superb industries, superb businesses, great place for a young man like I was to learn. And and then, once that young man grew up, I guess um, I was more attracted by emerging markets. I was more attracted by our home country, Serbia, which is far less, clean and organized. But that was probably something I was looking for. So this organization, this honesty is great. Of course, it has its downside. Some people may find it a little boring.
Yes, yes, that was my experience. I also spent some time there when I was growing up. My dad lives there, and that's exactly what I kind of thought. Especially when you're younger. Not that I was like wild ever, but it just seemed like very sterile and boring. But I was there recently, and my observation, which I actually loved this time, is that there's a lot of culture there. And to me, like in the first 5 or 6 days, we went to 5 or 6 different museums and foundations and libraries, and like we went to a paper museum, so the Gutenberg press and all these things. And it's just so, I think, interwoven with just the lifestyle there. It's so accessible. People even who work in the pharmaceutical industry or some of this mechanical stuff that you mentioned, a lot of these companies have museums on their campus too. So I was really impressed with that. Was that something you noticed as well?
Yes, and I think there's a reason to that. Another feature of Switzerland is that it has been for centuries a refuge for basically for Europe. In that sense, it's quite similar to the US, only it existed a little earlier. US kind of became a thing in the 1600s, whereas Switzerland predated that actually. Swiss were the ones who were providing refuge to people whose lives were threatened because of religion, ideas, everywhere else, and that creates for a very nice mixture of both freedom and all kinds of weird ideas. That's usually very good for culture. Hence, you have very famous writers, French writers who lived in Switzerland, German artists who basically lived in Switzerland. It went from Middle Ages, people fleeing religious persecution, to recently the Swiss are admitting Ukrainian refugees. During the Second World War, they received a number of refugees from Nazi Germany. So yeah, this refuge status kind of brought them as a plus a wealth of ideas. Some of the really stunning ideas in the world history, in the history of ideas, in the world culture, come from Switzerland. Like the whole Enlightenment came with the French encyclopedists who were more or less based on Rousseau, a Swiss French writer. Um, you you have um, you have Jung, the other, aside from Freud, the other, I don't want to say creator, but the other, like, column of psychology, who was also based in Switzerland.
Right, right.
And then numerous other.
Charlie Chaplin, we talked about him.
So
also.
Charlie Chaplin was not Swiss, but he ended his life in Switzerland. The famous writer, Belgian writer, Simenon, they were friends, actually, they were neighbors.
Tina Turner.
Tina Turner. Tina Turner. No, you're absolutely right. Huge cultural icon.
Yeah.
So yeah, Swiss are, when I think about it, Switzerland is a little bit like California with significantly worse weather.
Yeah. Yeah, you're
California plays a little bit this role as well throughout history, and the United States as a whole. The United States is a great refuge for persecuted, hungry,
ambitious people.
Yeah, and it has its super share of world achievements in the domain of culture and human thought.
Yeah. What do you think is the role of like the state in promoting culture? Like the podcast is about creative thinking, but also not just like visual arts, but in general, and so for me, I feel like being creative is not like just about slapping pretty colors on a canvas, but also, just thinking and making and contributing to society. Do you think that the state has a role in this, or do you think it's just something that organically grows?
Well, as you know, I come from a former socialist country, same as you.
Well, yeah, we come from the same place.
Exactly. So it's a country which lived for 70 years under Marxist ideology, statist ideology, and I think I was born in the 20th century, which was a century of I would say state totalitarianism, fascism on one side, but mostly, and I think most famously, Marxist socialism. So I'm a little allergic to state involvement in anything which is not the bare necessity and bare minimum.
Mm-hmm.
In bare necessity and bare minimum, von Hayek, the great Austrian economist, listed it very simply as security, internal, external, foreign affairs, justice. Culture, economy, I think should be left to individuals or companies or groups or civil society. I don't think it's a domain of the state. So I'm against states' involvement because it always comes with a price, and very often the price is hidden, and very often the price is too high.
The reason I say that, it seems to me that in Switzerland, is it just a function of the money that's there? Obviously when there's, foundations, there's a lot of money being pumped into culture. So there can be museums, there can be some of these things. But at the same time, I recently went to a concert here in downtown LA. It's the LA Philharmonic, and it was Dudamel was the composer, and Dudamel I think is from Colombia or someplace like that, where he actually benefited from this education that's sponsored by the country that he's from, which is kind of not totally socialist or Marxist, but in that definitely on that side of the spectrum in the 21st century too. And so I was just I'm by the way, I'm totally aligned with you on the whole state thing. But I was just wondering, like, like we get to benefit from something like that, where this country sponsored him and he's here now, and I think he's going to he's leaving the LA Philharmonic. So from that perspective too, I was just kind of like, it just made me wonder,
Yeah. No, I understand what you're saying, and it's unfortunately it's this fallacy a lot of people fall into, which is to see the benefits of state involvement. What they fail to see is that that money comes from somewhere, and usually that money comes from you and me, and actually, especially me. That's what hurts.
Right.
So I'm actually always reminded by how much in taxes I'm paying, and it's actually way too much.
Yeah, we all are. But I feel like for me, the way I see it, it's like
And
my
then
ticket.
yes,
It's my ticket to like play the game.
No, you're right.
begin with.
And yes, then we get some crumbs
Yeah,
here
yeah.
and there, So we're taking
I
a
think
lot of
about
money
it,
out of the pocket, and then we get some crumbs here and there in benefits. You are right. They don't eat everything
yeah.
that they take from us. Some of it they
I
send back.
usually think about taxes when I hit a pothole. That's when I think about my taxes. But nevertheless, what I also love about you is how much you value education. And so so after Switzerland, you went to Harvard, which is
Yes.
where you got your master's. Tell us about that experience.
Well, it was a great experience of my life. I came to Switzerland while in high school. I spent a summer with a friend traveling across the U.S. Sorry, not Switzerland, U.S. So I knew U.S. before I came to Harvard. I spent a summer traveling with Greyhound buses across the U.S. with a friend of mine when I was 16, and that was a blast. And I've seen almost every state, actually, maybe not every state, but a lot of the states and a lot of the places. But I've never lived in the States before I came from my MBA. I was 24, and it was after a very dry university. I studied business. I studied finance at university, and I was underwhelmed by the European style of higher learning, where professors would come and open their books and read from their books for 45 minutes an hour, and then close their books and walk away. Never have other contacts with us. We would talk to research assistants, and not a lot. It was overcrowded.
Even
not
in Switzerland?
Not really interesting. No, especially in Switzerland. I went to a very famous, in the German-speaking part, very famous business university, business college, which is in St. Gallen, University of St. Gallen. And I was, frankly, during my college years, I just did the bare minimum to pass, and I tried, myself in gazillion extracurricular activities, from working for a publishing firm to starting a rugby football club, to getting involved in student politics, starting 3 businesses, joining all kinds of clubs and societies. I just didn't find the class interesting. And then I came to HBS, to Harvard Business School, and I was really enchanted by the school, by the people, by the teachers, by the possibility to learn in an academic setting, to learn business in an academic setting. It's not so evident. Business is a craft. It's very hard to learn it in a classroom. And I think Harvard does a great job. So all in all, it was great 2 years. I loved it. I had fun. I met some of the best friends I have today. I learned a lot. And of course, it gave me opportunities which I wouldn't have otherwise. So I'm very thankful to Harvard for all these things.
So in this recent interview that I listened to, what struck me, like you were talking about like kind of like what it like the role of education versus you know, like just the experience that you get like when you start working somewhere. And something you mentioned like really kind of stuck with me, and that is that like you're obviously very tuned into like the like the economies of the world and how things are working, and you're, I mean, you know probably more about California than, you know, all of that than I ever will. And so what you said was that, you know, some of these like Silicon Valley like people actually have a liberal arts education. And why that's kind of important to me is that, you know, this podcast is about creative thinking. And so it seems to me that this type of creative thinking that you learn in something other than business, other than like learning about finance, actually helps you maybe even more, you know? So maybe you can elaborate on that.
Yeah, with pleasure. Let me just come to something that you said. Actually, you represent to me the true Californian girl. You come from Serbia. You're beautiful. You're blonde. You're cultured. You're very articulate.
Thank you.
And actually, when we came with my wife to California, you were one of the first people we met, and you really helped us get into the vibe and start loving California, which we love it, you know, since then.
Thank you. I love it here too.
And you
know?
as well.
It's
so.
dope. It's
It
so
is.
dope.
It is. It is. You're absolutely right.
And actually, last night you were kind of like, because I'm going to also maybe digress a little bit from my question. You know, occasionally we'll connect over the phone, and I think last time we were talking, you were like, you gotta come to Serbia. Like, you gotta come. Like, you gotta, like, you know, it's amazing here, and I know, and it is. And then last night you were like, man, I gotta live here. I'm
gonna move. I'm moving tomorrow.
So
you're right.
Well,
you're right.
You.
When I'm
hope
here,
that happens.
I love
the house across the street. I'm telling you.
You know what? I'm thinking about it.
We can have cookouts. Like, so.
No, look. What you're referring to, liberal arts. Human civilization is based on stories. We need stories. We live by stories. We learn by stories. Even, you know, our religions are stories. You know, Buddha, Muhammad, Jesus. Those are just great pieces of literature. You know, our parents' parents, our family histories, the narratives of our business, of our careers. What do we do? Who we are? How do we define ourselves? Where are we really good? Where do we want to go? Where do we want to become better? So human life is based on stories, and stories are really literature. So you know, so it's good to remember today when a lot of people are, and kind of the fashion is to think of STEM, engineering, and technical knowledge as source of all good. I'm not against technical knowledge. I think it's important. I just think that we shouldn't forget the basis of it, and to me, the basis of it are the stories and narratives, and that's why, you know, that's why it's important for the children, but also for adults, for all of us to read, to watch movies, to, you know, especially to read good books, because through that we get to understand the world better, and we get to understand narratives, you know, be part of, enter narratives, join other people's narratives or groups' narratives, start our own, you know, merge them. This is very important for us in our lives. Careers, families, you know, where we want to live. That is what I was referring to. And statistics show that successful entrepreneurs and in general successful people are, you know, successful politicians, successful lawyers, successful doctors are the ones who are mastering the narratives. So usually those are liberal arts majors in majority of cases. Again, when we think of technology, which is taking huge importance, which has already taken and is doing more and more so with AI and whatnot of our lives, it is important to understand that yes, technical skills are important, but narratives behind which drive, which direct technical skills, which direct technical efforts are just as important, if not more so.
So, in terms of we were talking about liberal arts education. I just actually couldn't wait to get to this part of what I wanted to talk to you about, and that's you founded a private school. And so, a couple of years ago, you invited us, meaning my daughter, to be a part of this pilot program. So, the school is a private school, but you also have another sort of school under the same umbrella that teaches Serbian language and culture to kids abroad. And I wanted to say, and I've told you this before, this literally changed our life, like my life as well. It changed my daughter's life, but it changed my life as well through her. And what I love about the school is that it's not just language; it's also culture, it's community, it's so much more than what you can think it is. I've learned a lot about the place where I'm from through this. Like I learned because, like you said, we are from a time when this part of history wasn't promoted, for political reasons or whatever reasons. And I think that it really took away a lot from this story, the narrative that you were mentioning. And my daughter loves it to this day. I was just telling you last night, like when we were on our vacation in Switzerland and Italy and Croatia, my daughter speaks only Serbian now. And this is coming from a kid that was kind of scared and ashamed. And now she's very proud. And it helped her psyche, she has friends. She loves her teacher. This woman is, by the way, like a relative to us, Alexandra. And so, thank you. Thank you for that. Big thank you for that. It helped us connect with other family members. It's just it's so broad, this, what role this experience had in our lives. So tell us, how did you come up with this? How did you, come up with this idea? I mean, we have children of the same age, so I think that was a part of it. But just tell me, your story. How did you come up with this?
Yeah, with pleasure. I'm so happy it worked out for Nika and you, and it works for thousands of kids across the world. It's a very neat school, and we have 4 of them. We have the Serbian school, we have a Mexican school, we have Ukrainian school, and we have French school for the diasporas across the world. So, and especially people living in very strong culture like the US, often the kids from first generation immigrants usually had difficulties learning the language and culture of their parents. And yet at the same time, it's so accessible to them. So it's so easy to become bicultural and bilingual when your parents are the first generation, which is the case for a lot of people in the States. So we're bridging that gap with this school. Coming back to the education, I got interested in education very early on. As you know, we have an investment bank in Europe and Middle East, and for years I'm hiring young people from university, and I'm not really satisfied with their level of education. Intellectually, analytically, they're usually great, but character-wise, they're somewhat lacking. for the last 20 years, we've recruited hundreds of young men and women. And I always thought, getting them at the end of college or university is probably too late. So I should probably try and help form them before, which means focus on, K to 12 education. And so for a long time, I was planning and dreaming and envisioning how I would change the education. And then I've got my kids, actually got them the same year, a couple of months difference. And when I got my kids, I got a deadline to start the school because, I was not really satisfied by
deadlines are good sometimes because they make you like, just like get with it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So my kids were the trigger, clearly.
Mm-hmm.
And it's neat because so I started the school, and it's neat because I resolved the problem, my personal problems, the problem of my kids' education. I'm also able to give back to the community in that way, or communities, Serbian, Ukrainian, Mexican. And lastly, not leastly, I think the next Google. So I think it's going to be very profitable. It's not for the time being. We're still investing. It's money losing, money burning, but it's an investment. But I think at the end, the next mega corporation, the next Google or Facebook, I think is going to be in education.
That's interesting.
And I think we have a shot at that because I'm really amazed by what we have done in the last 5 years since we started this school, or these group of schools, because we're talking really about a group of different education.
It's a portfolio.
And we're about to open new ones. There are charter schools in the US who want to copy our model. We're opening a boarding school, a boarding high school in a 400-year-old building in Serbia. So there's a lot of stuff happening. So it's a group of schools that we started, and it started from the fact